For years, she was the quiet provider, the one who always reached for the check before anyone else even pretended to. Family dinners, groceries, birthday parties, even home repairs. Everything was charged to her card, signed with a tired smile, and met with a distracted, "Thanks, Mom." But behind that smile lived a truth no one saw. She was drowning in silence and receipts. Every dinner ended the same way. A half-hearted joke from her son-in-law, a fake laugh from her daughter, and the unspoken assumption that Mom would handle it. She never argued, never refused. That's what good mothers did, right? Until one night, she opened her bank app and saw the truth in numbers. A lifetime of giving, of paying for love that was never returned. Something inside her broke. Or maybe finally it healed. The next family dinner seemed ordinary. Soft lights, laughter, the usual jokes about her generosity. But when the bill came, she didn't reach for her wallet. She reached for freedom. Calmly, she placed enough cash for her own meal on the table and stood up. "That covers mine," she said softly. "The rest is up to you." The table froze. Forks stopped midair. Her daughter's voice cracked, her son-in-law turned pale. And for the first time, she didn't explain herself. She just walked out, her footsteps steady, her heart light. Outside, the night air felt different, cool, honest, free. They called her selfish. They called her dramatic. But she didn't care. For the first time in decades, she had paid only for herself. Weeks later, she packed a small bag and left for a quiet lakeside cabin. No family, no demands, no bills that weren't hers. Just sunrise, still water, and a cup of tea she didn't owe to anyone. And when her phone buzzed with messages full of guilt and blame, she smiled and turned it off. Because the only thing she owed now was peace. The waiter placed the leather check folder at the edge of the table, a discreet gesture I already recognized as the ticking of a clock. Valerie was mid-laughter, her elbow brushing against Stephen, who was swirling the last of his wine in his glass. "Oh, Mom," she said, drawing out the words like a teenager faking innocence. "We forgot our wallet again." Stephen let out a chuckle like a friend sharing a joke. "Can you believe that?" he said, without even pretending to check his pockets. Across the table, the kids laughed, mouths full of dessert, oblivious or maybe just used to the rhythm of the ritual by now. Smiled. The same smile I'd used the last 5 times this happened, the one that no longer reached my eyes. I reached for my purse, my fingers moving on autopilot. "It's fine," I murmured, sliding my card into the folder with practiced grace. The waiter nodded slightly and disappeared. I didn't miss how Stephen relaxed into his chair, or how Valerie was already ordering another round of drinks, even after dessert. I said nothing. I never did. That was part of the unspoken deal. Outside, the Puerto Vallarta boardwalk shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Boats swayed in their slips, lights reflected on the water like broken stars. I tried to focus on that instead of the total, one I hadn't asked to see. The waiter returned. I signed the receipt quickly and tucked it away before anyone could glimpse the number. "Thanks again, Mom," Valerie said, kissing me on the cheek with that distracted affection. "You're the best," added Stephen, already standing, adjusting his collar in the wall mirror like the guest of honor. The kids said nothing, just ran toward the valet, arguing over who would get the window seat. I followed slowly, my heels echoing against the tiles. Outside, the night air bit harder than I expected. When the valet pulled up with Stephen's car, I caught my reflection in the window. The same coat, the same smile. Only the woman behind it looked a little more tired. As always, I slid into the back seat, the leather still warm from the sun. Valerie turned toward me. "Hey, could we stop by Costco tomorrow? We ran out of diapers." He nodded. Later that night, when the house was silent, I opened the bank app and reviewed the receipts. At home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I left my purse on the bench by the door, turned on the hallway light, and went straight to the kitchen table. My laptop waited, black screen. I opened it and tapped twice. It lit up, as if it already knew where we were going. Bank app. Login. Face recognition. Accepted. Numbers flickered before me. Rows of transactions in clean black font. A steakhouse in March. Toy store in April. An electric bill I'd never paid for my own house. Another restaurant. Bah. My name tied to things I hadn't eaten, hadn't enjoyed, hadn't needed. Kept scrolling. The icons next to each charge reminded me of what they were. Soriana. School supplies for the kids. Amazon. One of Steven's gadgets. Costco. Bulk diapers and protein shakes. Payment to a heating company in December. That one was for their house too. I paid it when the heater broke so the kids wouldn't be cold. I told myself it was temporary. I always did. The first time was when Steven lost his job. Valerie called, her voice shaking with panic. Just until the end of the month, Mom. Just a little push. And I said yes, of course. What else could I say to my only daughter? Holding a newborn with a toddler clinging to her leg. They were drowning. I was the lifeline. But now Steven drove a Tesla. And I still had George's old Subaru. The one with the passenger door that jammed in winter. I opened a spreadsheet. Titled the tab. Receipts 2023. Then entered the latest charge. $12,078.40. Envistro, the pearl. The total in the corner blinked. 5 digits. Closed the laptop. For a moment, I just stared at the tablecloth. The faint circle of my teacup still printed on the fabric. Tomorrow they'd want to stop by Costco. And I already knew without checking who would pay. The corner table at Lucy's Diner was always free at 4:30. Early enough to miss the dinner rush. Late enough not to feel like hiding. I ordered the usual. Grilled trout, mashed potatoes, and a cup of decaf. The waitress, Norma, called everyone Hart, and always brought an extra napkin without being asked. It wasn't fancy, but the food was warm, the tea was strong, and the silence was mine. I sat there chewing slowly, watching the gray sky and the orange trees in bloom through the window. My phone buzzed on the table. Photo from Valerie. A group picture. Everyone smiling in a patio lit with string lights. Steven held a drink. The kids' faces were smeared with frosting. A sign in the background read, "Happy birthday, Aunt Claire." I blinked. I hadn't even known there was a party. A second later, another message. "Ah, I forgot to tell you. You would have loved the cake. Carrot with walnuts." I placed the phone face down beside my plate. My stomach tightened. George used to say, "Don't raise a princess, Evelyn. Raise a person." But when he died and it was just Valerie and me, I couldn't say no. Not after everything we'd lost. I made her birthdays bigger. Gave more than I had. Took extra shifts at the library and still came home in time to cook her favorite meal. I wanted to fill the silence he'd left. With certainty, with comfort. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I never asked for anything in return. Norma refilled my cup and gave me a sad little smile, like she could see the thoughts swimming behind my eyes. I nodded in thanks and took a sip. The coffee was lukewarm now, but I drank it anyway. At home, I placed the leftover container in the fridge. Maybe I'd eat it tomorrow. Maybe not. I took out my planner. Valerie's birthday was marked. Always in red. I looked at the square, pen hovering in the air. Then, slowly I crossed it out. I woke to birds pecking at the window. For a moment I forgot it was my birthday. Then I saw the card George had given me years ago, still tucked into the mirror frame. To the woman who makes an entire life possible. Brewed tea. Fed the neighbor's cat that wandered into my yard. Read a few chapters of a novel I wasn't really following. By noon I checked my phone 3 times. No missed calls, no messages. At 3 o'clock I drove to the supermarket and bought a small chocolate cupcake and a bouquet of tulips, the petals already starting to droop. The cashier didn't ask if they were for anyone. Paid in cash. At 5 o'clock I lit a candle in the kitchen. Sang softly off-key just to fill the air. Took one bite of the cupcake and left the rest in the fridge. Too sweet. Far too sweet. At 8 o'clock my phone buzzed. A message from Freya, my eldest granddaughter. "Hope you had some cake." That was it. No call. Not even from Valerie. I sat at the table, hand resting on the edge of the plate, remembering last year. We'd rented that vineyard in Valle de Guadalupe for Valerie's birthday, the one with the string quartet and private chef. She'd worn an emerald green dress and cried when I handed her the envelope with the spa voucher. Stephen toasted, the most radiant woman in the room. The bill was 17,000 pesos. I paid it silently without asking. And when the check came, she kissed my cheek and said, "You're too good to me, Mom." But no one asked when my birthday was. Or what I wanted. I turned off my phone. I stayed in the silence. Outside, a pair of raccoons scurried near the trash bins. One knocked a lid over. I didn't move, just listened to the sound of something else being stirred in the dark. And in that moment, I knew I didn't need a gift. What I needed was to stop giving. I wrote everything I wanted to say on a yellow sheet of paper. I practiced it in front of the mirror. Steady voice, clear tone, no anger, just direct. I even timed it to make sure it wasn't too long. No guilt, no shouting, just the truth. "I need to talk to you about boundaries," it began. "I've been covering too much and it's hurting me." Simple. Honest. I folded the page and slipped it into my purse beside my wallet. We met at one of Stephen's favorite places, steak and seafood. Dim lights, jazz soft enough not to distract. The kids ordered sliders and cherry sodas. Valerie asked about my week without really listening. Stephen complained about taxes. When the bill came, the waiter placed it beside me. Not in the middle of the table. Not near Stephen. Just beside me. I reached into my purse, brushing against the folded note. But my voice got stuck. Valerie was laughing at something Freya had done at school. Stephen raised his glass. "To Mom," he said like it was a tradition. "The one who never lets us down." I smiled out of habit. Pulled out the card instead of the note. Handed it to the waiter. The waiter walked away. I didn't hear the next 10 minutes of conversation. Only the hum of regret, the pulse of disappointment in my ears. Outside in the car I sat in the back while Stephen drove. The kids argued over the music. Valerie scrolled on her phone. I looked out the window, headlights passing in blurs. A tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, hoping no one noticed. At home I put the note in the dresser drawer. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't done with it yet. I put on my nightgown, brushed my teeth, and slipped under the quilt George's mother had made the year we married. The edges were frayed, but the warmth was still there. Tomorrow they'd ask for something else. Groceries, maybe, or another dinner. And maybe next time I wouldn't take out my wallet. It started with the Costco receipt. Pesos spent on diapers, almond milk, bulk snacks, and protein powder for Stephen. I'd swiped the card without hesitation as always. But this time I folded the receipt and placed it in a drawer instead of crumpling it into my purse. Then came the vet bill, $3.60, for allergy shots and flea medication. The receptionist smiled and said, "You're such an amazing dog, Grandma." And I laughed with her, even though I'd never asked for that title. I printed the confirmation email and placed it next to the Costco receipt. Within a week, the drawer was full. A bakery charge for Freya's school fair. A Soriana purchase that covered everyone's Halloween costumes. The dishwasher repair at Valerie's when Stephen was between paychecks. I bought a folder and labeled it clearly. Expenses, the Salazar family. Unreimbursed. I printed statements, stapled notes, and wrote dates and reasons beside each one. The columns added up fast. Too fast. I didn't tell anyone. But I needed to say it out loud, so I booked a session with a community counselor at the center. Her name was Lydia. Her office smelled like mint and quiet. I stumbled through my story about the money, the dinners, the birthdays I paid for, and the one they forgot. She listened carefully, then asked one question. "What would you do with that money if it were only for you?" The room went still. My mind searched for a trip, a class, new furniture. But nothing came to me. I'd given for so long that I'd forgotten how to wish for myself. I looked down at my hands. Familiar hands that had packed lunches, signed checks, written every birthday card. "I don't know," I whispered. Lydia nodded, kind but firm. "That's where we start." At home, I placed the folder on the kitchen table and left it open. A page shifted in the window breeze. It was the spa receipt from 2 months ago. Valerie had called it preventive self-care for her stress. I stared at it for a long time, then opened a new page in the folder. This time I chose the restaurant. Not one of their trendy spots with valet parking and foamed sauces, but a small Italian place tucked between a flower shop and a laundromat in Guadalajara. The kind of place George and I would have chosen when we were young, sharing plates and leaving full. Valerie complained when I sent her the name. "Mom," she replied, "are you sure? It looks kind of rustic." I told her the food was good and the people kind. That was enough. They arrived overdressed. Stephen in a blazer too fancy for the place, Valerie with hair styled like she was attending a gala. The kids sat across from me, eyes already fixed on the dessert menu. "Let's hope they take vouchers," Valerie joked as the waiter poured water. Stephen laughed. "Mom's got us covered, as always." Everyone at the table laughed. I smiled with them, warm, relaxed. My purse sat in my lap, closed. Inside, I carried only my phone, a tube of lip balm, and 760 pesos in cash, wrapped in a napkin. Enough for my lemon chicken and a third of the tip. Dinner unfolded like a script we'd written together years ago. They ordered cocktails, appetizers, main dishes with substitutions. Their voices overlapped, easy chatter, inside jokes filling the air. I nodded, laughed when I was supposed to, but let the sound pass through me like wind through tall grass. I savored every bite of my meal, chewed slowly, drank water. When the plates were cleared and the check came in a brown leather folder, it landed beside me as always. Stephen leaned back. "Mom, you're the best." Valerie tilted her head. "You're not going to make us split every penny, right?" I reached into my purse, took out the napkin-wrapped cash, and unfolded it carefully. Counted the bills. "This is for mine," I said, placing the money beside the check. "The chicken and a third of the tip." The table went silent. I stood, took my coat, and walked toward the door without looking back. The door sighed softly behind me, the cool night air brushing my cheeks. I didn't hurry. I could still hear them inside. Nervous forks clinking, chairs scraping. I knew what was coming. "Mom!" Valerie's voice cracked through the air, a hook catching in the dark. I turned slowly as she hurried after me, her heels clicking too fast for her balance. Stephen followed, his face tight. "Wait, what are you doing?" he asked, laughing too loudly. "You forgot your card, right?" I met his eyes. "I didn't bring it." He blinked. "What?" Stephen took a step forward. "Are you saying you didn't pay?" "I paid for mine." They stood frozen. Behind them, the kids pressed their faces to the restaurant window, watching like it was a play they didn't understand. "You can't be serious," Valerie said, her voice rising. "We don't have enough to cover everything." "I know what you thought," I said softly but clearly. "You thought I'd always be the wallet, the safety net, the guarantee." Stephen shifted uncomfortably. "This is really embarrassing." "I imagine it is." I turned toward the sidewalk, my steps measured. Valerie called after me again, but I didn't stop. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just walked. At the corner I paused and looked back. Not at them but at the restaurant. Through the window, I could see the waiter standing awkwardly beside the table, the check still in his hand. Valerie digging through her purse. Stephen patting his jacket pockets. The laughter was gone. I reached the bus stop and sat down, taking a deep breath. My hands rested empty in my lap. The glow from the streetlights fell across my coat like pale moons. The 760 pesos I left behind had bought more than a dinner. They'd bought silence, a message. And maybe, at last, a beginning. At home, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened my folder. I filed away the last receipt and stuck a note beside it. Final dinner. Total. 3,720 pesos, divided by 3, unexpectedly. The calls started before I even got home. First came Valerie. Voicemail after voicemail, her tone climbing with each one. How could you humiliate us like that? You made a scene in front of the kids. Do you think that's fair? I didn't answer. I didn't delete them either. I just let them pile up in the inbox, untouched. Then came Steven's messages, short and cold. You really hit Valerie below the belt. The kids are upset. We'll pay you back someday. And then, strangely, emails from Freya and Florence, from their school accounts. Sad emojis, a blurry drawing that might have been a family dinner table. I stared at the screen for a long while. I wanted to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt something quieter, something like clarity. That Friday, I transferred the money I'd saved for groceries into a reservation. 3 nights in a lakeside cabin in Michoacan. Meals included. No cell service. I packed a small bag, a sketchbook I hadn't touched in years, and an old swimsuit I'd almost thrown away twice. The cabin was simple and the silence was deep. I swam in the mornings, slow strokes across water so still it felt sacred. In the afternoons, I sat on the porch and painted what I saw. Trees, shadows, my own hand resting on the wooden railing. It didn't matter if they looked like anything. They were mine. At night, I read under a lamp until I fell asleep, full of food I hadn't cooked or served. My phone stayed off. When I turned it on the morning I left, it wouldn't stop vibrating. I didn't read the messages. I deleted them all. Back home, I cleaned out the fridge, watered the plants, and added a new page to the folder. Not a receipt. A photo I'd taken at the lake. Dawn, a pink sky breaking over still water. Underneath it I wrote, cost 6,240 pesos. Result, peace. I slipped the photo into a plastic sleeve and turned the page. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open, its pages slightly curved from use. The spreadsheet was complete. Numbers, dates, descriptions, silent evidence of all the years I'd spent softening other people's lives. But this last page was different. At the top I wrote, non-refundable receipt for me. Then I tucked in a printed confirmation from an email the week before. Mediterranean flavors for beginners. 1,840 pesos. And another. A train ticket to Puerto Vallarta. One-way no return date yet. I went alone. Stayed in a small coastal town where the salty air tousled my hair. And the silence felt good in my bones. I found a second-hand bookstore where no one knew my name. I laughed loud, freely, with women who expected nothing from me, except to share the wine. After dinner, we walked barefoot along the beach, shoes dangling from our fingers. Someone asked if I missed my family. I didn't hesitate. I missed the idea of them. Not the group chats full of requests. Not the polished birthdays or the performative toasts. But the image I'd carried for so long. A family that shared the weight when it came. With more than empty hands and full stomachs. That image had faded. And in its place was something steadier. Solitude without emptiness. Space to breathe. A life that finally belonged to me. I took from a drawer a Polaroid from the trip. Me wearing an apron laughing. Holding a burnt flatbread with exaggerated pride. I stuck it to the inside cover of the folder, then closed it. Not to forget, but to finish. My phone blinked once. A silent notification. I didn't look. I poured another cup of tea and stepped onto the porch. The sun was low, golden gentle light. I settled into the chair George had built. And wrapped myself in a soft blanket. In that silence there was no pain. I didn't wonder if I should have said more or done less. For the first time in years, I could feel the shape of my own life. And it finally fit.